happiness. Mark Andrews stood at his drafting table, pencil moving across the blueprint before him. The new downtown development project demanded his complete attention, yet his mind kept drifting to Eleanor. 7 years of marriage, and still, the thought of her elegant smile made his heart skip a beat. His office phone buzzed. "Mr. Andrews, your wife is here to see you," his assistant Sarah announced. "Send her in," Mark replied, already straightening his tie. The door opened, revealing Eleanor in a tailored navy dress that accentuated her graceful figure. "Darling," she purred, gliding across the room. "I thought I'd surprise you for lunch." Mark embraced her, breathing in her expensive perfume. "This is unexpected. I thought you had that charity luncheon with your mother today?" "Cancelled," Eleanor said, perching herself on the edge of his desk. Her manicured fingers traced patterns on the wooden surface. "Besides, I missed you. We barely see each other these days with how busy you've been." There was something in her tone, a slight edge that made Mark pause. "I know I've been wrapped up in this project, but once it's done—" "That's what you said about the last 3 projects," Eleanor interrupted, though her smile remained fixed. "I was thinking we need a break. Both of us." Mark's brow furrowed. "A break?" "Mother suggested we join her at the Hamilton Resort in the Hamptons next week. It would be perfect, just what we need to reconnect." "Eleanor, you know I can't leave right now. The development plans are more important than your marriage." The words were sharp, though delivered with a honeyed smile. "That's not fair," Mark protested. "This project could mean partnership at the firm." Eleanor stood, smoothing her dress. "And that's wonderful, darling. But I need more than blueprints and business dinners. I need excitement, adventure." She leaned close, her lips brushing his ear. "I need my husband." Mark felt the familiar pull of guilt. Eleanor had given up a promising career in art curation to support his ambitions, to be the perfect architect's wife. He owed her this much, didn't he? "Let me see what I can do," he conceded. Eleanor's face lit up. "Perfect. I'll have Mother make the arrangements." She kissed his cheek, leaving a perfect red imprint. "Don't work too late tonight." As she sashayed out of his office, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but he pushed the thought aside, returning to his blueprints. If Eleanor wanted a vacation, he'd give her one. After all, what could go wrong? The following evening, dinner at the Andrews residence was interrupted by the shrill ring of the doorbell. Eleanor practically jumped from her seat. "That must be Mother." Mark suppressed a sigh. Beatrice Wellington's unexpected visits were becoming more frequent lately. He watched as Eleanor rushed to greet her mother, their excited voices carrying from the foyer. "Mark, darling." Beatrice swept into the dining room, handbag swinging from her arm. "Still at the dinner table? How quaint." "Beatrice," Mark nodded, rising to pull out a chair. "Would you like to join us?" "Oh, no, no. I've just come from the most marvelous dinner at the Clayton Club. I simply had to share the wonderful news with Eleanor." She paused, eyeing Mark. "Though perhaps this should wait." "Mother," Eleanor chided, though her eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. "Mark should hear this too. After all, it concerns our vacation." Beatrice settled into the chair, her perfectly coiffed silver hair catching the light. "Well, if you insist. Julian St. Clair has confirmed he'll be at the Hamilton next week. You remember Julian, don't you, Eleanor? He's made quite a name for himself in venture capital." Mark noticed Eleanor's cheeks flush slightly. "Julian St. Clair? The name sounds familiar." "Oh, you wouldn't know him, dear," Beatrice dismissed with a wave. "He moves in rather elevated circles. But he's expressed such interest in reconnecting with Eleanor. They were quite close in college, weren't they, darling?" Eleanor's laugh held a nervous edge. "Ancient history, Mother. But it will be nice to catch up." Mark watched the exchange, noting the meaningful glances between mother and daughter. Something cold settled in his stomach, but he pushed it aside. Eleanor had chosen him. After all, she'd married him, despite Beatrice's barely concealed disappointment that her daughter hadn't secured a more socially advantageous match. "Speaking of the Hamilton," Beatrice continued, "Eleanor, we simply must discuss the sleeping arrangements. The resort is quite particular about their booking policies. Can't we just add Mark's name to the reservation? Eleanor asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Beatrice's lips curved in a practiced smile. I'm afraid not, dear. The Hamilton is terribly strict about their member guest policies, but I'm sure Mark won't mind making other arrangements. There's a charming bed and breakfast just a few miles down the road. Mark set down his fork carefully. You're suggesting I stay at a different hotel than my wife? Oh, don't be dramatic, darling. Eleanor reached across the table to pat his hand. It's just for appearance's sake. You know how these old money establishments are. I know how they can be when they want to be, Mark replied evenly, thinking of the many country clubs and social events where he'd been made to feel like an outsider. But this seems excessive. Beatrice's expression hardened slightly. Well, if you're going to make a fuss about it, perhaps it's better if you focus on your work. Eleanor and I can manage quite well on our own. Mother, Eleanor protested, but Mark noted she didn't actually disagree. No, she's right, Mark said, standing. If you'll excuse me, I have some work to review. He retreated to his home office, the sound of their continued conversation muffled by the closed door. Settling behind his desk, Mark pulled up the Hamilton Resort's website. As he suspected, there was nothing in their policies about such restrictive booking requirements. His phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Don't be upset, darling. Mother's just set in her ways. We'll still have plenty of time together at the resort. Mark stared at the message, remembering Eleanor's earlier words about needing excitement and adventure. The pieces were there, but he couldn't, or wouldn't, put them together. Not yet. The drive to the Hamptons was tense. Eleanor spent most of it on her phone, typing furiously and occasionally letting out small laughs at whatever messages she was receiving. Mark focused on the road, trying to ignore the growing unease in his gut. They arrived at the Hamilton Resort just as the sun was beginning to set. The grand colonial-style building rose before them, its manicured grounds speaking of old money and exclusive membership. Beatrice was waiting in the lobby, surrounded by a small mountain of luggage. There you are, she exclaimed, air-kissing Eleanor's cheeks. I was beginning to worry you'd hit traffic. The drive was fine, Mother, Eleanor said, already reaching for the room key Beatrice held out. Mark grabbed their bags from the porter. Which room are we in? A silence fell over the lobby. Eleanor and Beatrice exchanged glances. Mark, Eleanor began, her voice holding an edge of irritation. We discussed this. The booking situation. Yes, the mysterious booking situation that prevents me from staying in the same hotel as my wife, Mark interrupted. Except I checked, and there's no such policy. Beatrice's face hardened. Well, if you're going to be difficult about it. Oh, let's just tell him, a male voice cut in. He'll find out soon enough. Mark turned to see a tall, well-dressed man approaching from the bar. He moved with the easy confidence of someone used to getting his way, a predatory smile playing on his lips. Julian, Eleanor breathed, and in that single word, Mark heard everything he'd been refusing to acknowledge. Julian St. Clair extended his hand. You must be Mark. I've heard so much about you. His grip was firm, challenging. Though I must say, Eleanor's descriptions didn't do you justice. Mark's world narrowed to a single point. The way Eleanor was looking at Julian, with an intensity she hadn't directed at him in years. We didn't book a room for you, Beatrice announced, her voice dripping with barely concealed disdain. Perhaps you can find accommodation on one of the garden benches. They're quite comfortable, I'm told. The lobby fell silent. Other guests pretended not to watch while obviously straining to hear every word. Mark looked at Eleanor, waiting for her to defend him, to show any sign that this cruel humiliation wasn't part of her plan. Instead, she laughed. The sound cut through him like a blade. Did you really think we wanted you here? Eleanor's voice was thick with contempt. Julian's been my lover for months. This vacation was never about reconnecting with you. It was about finally being free to be with someone exciting, someone worthy of me. Mark stood very still, absorbing each word like a physical blow. He looked at the woman he'd loved for 7 years, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing his wife's face. I see, he said quietly. The words fell into the silence like stones into a deep well. Julian draped an arm around Eleanor's waist, pulling her close. Don't take it personally. Old chap Eleanor simply needed more than a middle-class architect could provide. Mark's hands clenched at his sides, but his voice remained steady. Is that all you have to say? What else is there? Eleanor's smile was cruel, triumphant. We only booked rooms for family members, not outsiders. Julian will be staying in my suite, where he belongs. You can sleep on that garden bench Mother mentioned, or better yet, just leave. No one wants you here. The lobby seemed to spin around Mark, but he remained perfectly still. Years of controlling his reactions in difficult client meetings served him well now. Without a word, he turned and walked toward the exit, his measured steps echoing on the marble floor. Behind him, he heard Eleanor's laughter mingling with Julian's, the sound following him out into the gathering dusk. The carefully manicured garden stretched before him, pristine and unwelcoming, just like the world Eleanor had always wanted to belong to. Mark kept walking, past the gardens, past the parking lot, out onto the winding road that led away from the Hamilton resort. Each step took him further from the life he'd thought he had, from the love he'd believed in, from the illusion of happiness he'd built his world around. He didn't stop until the resort was out of sight. Only then did he allow himself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. His marriage, his love, his trust. All of it had been a carefully constructed lie, designed to break him in the most public and humiliating way possible. As the reality of his situation settled over him like a heavy cloak, Mark heard footsteps approaching from behind. He turned, half expecting to see Eleanor or Julian coming to twist the knife further. Instead, he found himself looking into a familiar face from his past, one he hadn't seen in years. "Mark," the woman said softly. "Mark Andrews? Is that really you?" Chapter 2. The Calculated Retreat. Ava Chen stood before him, barely changed from their college days. Her dark hair was shorter now, cut in a sleek bob that framed her face, but her eyes still held that same sharp intelligence that had first drawn him to her in their advanced calculus class. "Ava," Mark managed, his voice rougher than he'd like. "This is unexpected." She stepped closer, concern evident in her expression. "I saw what happened in the lobby. I was having dinner in the restaurant and—" She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "You look like you could use a friend right now." Mark laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even him. "A friend? I just discovered my entire marriage was a lie orchestrated to humiliate me. I'm not sure friendship is enough to fix that. Then how about a conspiracy partner?" Ava's lips curved in a slight smile. "Because I have a feeling you're not going to let this go, and I happen to be very good at making things happen behind the scenes." Mark studied her carefully. "You always did have a talent for finding information people wanted to keep hidden. Still in cybersecurity?" "Among other things," she replied cryptically. "Let's get out of here. I know a place where we can talk without worry about prying eyes or ears." Mark hesitated, glancing back toward the resort. Through the gathering darkness, he could see the warm lights of the lobby where his life had shattered just minutes ago. "They're expecting me to cause a scene," he said slowly. "To break down, to beg, to make a fool of myself. That's why they did it so publicly." Ava nodded. "Then let's disappoint them. Come with me. We'll figure this out together." She led him to a sleek black car parked just around the bend. As they drove away from the Hamilton resort, Mark felt something shift inside him. The raw pain of betrayal began to crystallize into something harder, colder, more focused. "Tell me about Julian St. Clair," he said as they wound through the darkened streets. Ava's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "He's made quite a name for himself in the tech venture capital world, but not necessarily for the right reasons. There are rumors." "What kind of rumors?" "The kind that never quite make it to official investigations." Ava turned onto a narrow road leading away from the coast. "Companies that mysteriously fold after he invests in them, with all assets conveniently transferred before bankruptcy. Competitors who suddenly face anonymous cyber attacks." His first wife's suspicious death. Mark's head snapped up. His first wife? Isabella St. Clair. Drowned in their pool 3 years ago. Ruled an accident, but Ava shrugged expressively. Let's just say I've seen the police reports, and things don't quite add up. They pulled up to a modern house set back from the road, almost hidden among the trees. Ava typed a code into a keypad, and the garage door opened silently. My weekend getaway, she explained as they entered through an internal door. Completely off the grid and secured against electronic surveillance. The interior was spare but comfortable, dominated by banks of computer monitors. Ava moved to a small kitchen area and pulled out 2 glasses and a bottle of scotch. Start at the beginning, she said, pouring them each a generous measure. Tell me everything about Eleanor and how this happened. Mark took a long sip, letting the alcohol burn away some of the numbness. I thought I knew her. 7 years of marriage, and I thought I knew who she was. But looking back now, he paused, memories shifting into new patterns. There were signs. Small things I ignored because I didn't want to see them. Like what? The way she'd check her phone constantly these past few months. How she'd dress up for charity events I couldn't attend due to work. The sudden interest in taking vacations at exclusive resorts. Mark's laugh was bitter. God, I was blind. Ava settled into a chair across from him, her expression thoughtful. Not blind. Just trusting. There's a difference. She pulled a laptop toward her. Now, let's see what we can find out about Mr. St. Clair's current business dealings. For the next few hours, they dug into Julian's life. Ava's fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing security measures with practiced ease. The picture that emerged was troubling. A pattern of hostile takeovers, suspicious accidents befalling business rivals, and a trail of destroyed lives left in Julian's wake. He's careful, Ava muttered, frowning at a particularly encrypted file. But not careful enough. Look at this. She turned the screen toward Mark. It showed a series of transfers between shell companies, all leading back to a holding corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. He's moving money around, preparing for something big, she explained. And based on these dates, it started around the same time he began seeing Eleanor. Mark stared at the numbers, his architect's mind seeing patterns emerge. They're not just having an affair. This is about something bigger, isn't it? I think so. Ava pulled up another document. Your firm's new development project? The one you've been working so hard on? She pulled up a property record. Julian's shell companies have been quietly buying up land around the proposed site. He's positioning himself to profit from your work. Mark felt the pieces clicking into place. Eleanor would have known about the project's details. She saw the plans in my home office, and she passed that information to Julian, Ava confirmed. The question is, what do you want to do about it? Mark stood, pacing the length of the room. The numbness was fading, replaced by a cold clarity. I want them to pay, not just for the humiliation, but for everything. Julian's used to destroying people's lives? Let's see how he handles having his own life dismantled. Ava watched him carefully. That's not the Mark Andrews I remember from college. That Mark died in the Hamilton Resort lobby. He turned to face her. Will you help me? You don't even have to ask. Ava began typing again. I have some contacts who might be useful. A private investigator named Victor who specializes in corporate espionage. A former hacker called Rex who owes me a favor. And Clara, a financial analyst who's very good at following money trails. Why would they help us? Because Julian St. Clair has made enemies of all of them in one way or another. Ava's smile was sharp. They've been waiting for an opportunity like this. Mark nodded slowly. We'll need somewhere secure to work from. Somewhere Eleanor and Julian won't think to look. I know a place, Ava replied. A cabin in the Catskills. Remote, but with excellent internet connectivity. We can set up our base of operations there. As they planned through the night, Mark felt something shift inside him. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it was transforming into something else, a focused determination that would have surprised his old self. Chapter 3, Gathering Storm. The Hamilton Resort's presidential suite offered a panoramic view of the manicured grounds, but Eleanor Wellington Andrews barely noticed the scenery. She was too busy reveling in her triumph. Did you see his face? She laughed, accepting a champagne flute from Julian. So confused, so hurt. Like a puppy that's been kicked. Julian St. Clair lounged on the suite's plush sofa, his casual pose belying the predatory gleam in his eyes. "You were magnificent, darling. Though I must say, your mother's garden bench suggestion was an inspired touch." Mother always did have a flair for the dramatic, Eleanor agreed, settling beside him. "She never thought Mark was good enough for me. Too ordinary, too safe. And now?" Julian pulled her closer. "Now I have exactly what I deserve." She traced a finger along his jaw. "Someone who understands ambition, who isn't afraid to take what he wants." Julian caught her hand, his grip just tight enough to hint at the strength beneath his polished exterior. "Speaking of taking what we want, have you secured those development plans?" "All copied and stored safely," Eleanor assured him. Mark never suspected a thing. He was so focused on his precious project, he didn't even notice when I photographed the blueprints. "Perfect." Julian released her hand, reaching for his phone. "My team will begin acquiring the surrounding properties immediately. By the time your soon-to-be ex-husband realizes what's happening, it'll be too late." Eleanor frowned slightly. "You don't think he'll cause problems?" "Mark?" Julian laughed dismissively. "He's probably halfway back to the city by now, nursing his wounded pride. Men like him are predictable. They retreat, lick their wounds, maybe drink too much for a few weeks. But they don't fight back. They don't know how." A knock at the door interrupted them. Beatrice swept in, already dressed for dinner despite the late hour. "Well, that was certainly memorable," she declared, helping herself to the champagne. "Though I do hope you're prepared for the inevitable gossip, Eleanor." "Let them talk," Eleanor shrugged. "By the time the divorce is finalized, I'll be Mrs. St. Clair, and no one will remember Mark Andrews." Beatrice settled into an armchair, studying her daughter over the rim of her glass. His reaction was unusual. "I expected more dramatics." "What do you mean?" Eleanor's voice held a hint of uncertainty. "He was too calm," Beatrice mused, "too controlled. When your father left me, he raged, threatened, made quite a spectacle of himself. But Mark, he just walked away." Julian waved off her concern. "That just proves how weak he is. He couldn't even stand up for himself." "Perhaps," Beatrice conceded, though she didn't look convinced. "Still, it might be wise to have him watched, just in case." "Already arranged," Julian assured her. "I have people who handle these sorts of things discreetly." Eleanor stood abruptly, moving to the window. The gardens below were dark now, the bench her mother had mockingly suggested barely visible in the shadows. "You're both being paranoid," she insisted. "Mark isn't capable of causing trouble. He's probably holed up in his office right now, burying himself in work like he always does when things get difficult." But as she stared into the darkness, Eleanor couldn't quite shake the memory of Mark's expression in that final moment. There had been something in his eyes she'd never seen before, something cold and calculating that didn't fit with the predictable, devoted husband she'd married. In the reflection of the window, she saw Julian watching her with narrowed eyes. She forced a smile, pushing away her unease. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? The excitement, the danger, the sophisticated world she'd always felt she deserved. "Shall we dress for dinner?" she suggested brightly. "I hear the restaurant here is exceptional." As Eleanor changed into an evening gown, she deliberately avoided looking at her phone. She didn't want to admit that she'd been expecting, almost hoping for, desperate messages from Mark. But there had been nothing. No calls, no texts, no pleas for explanation or reconciliation. Just silence. And somehow, that silence was more unsettling than any reaction she'd imagined. Later that night, as Julian slept beside her, Eleanor found herself unable to rest. She slipped from the bed and returned to the window, drawn to the view of the garden bench where they'd intended to humiliate Mark. In the moonlight, it looked almost sinister, a prop in a cruel play that had gone slightly wrong. The script had called for Mark to break down, to beg, to make a scene that would justify their treatment of him. Instead, he had simply walked away, taking with him all their carefully planned satisfaction. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from an unknown number. "Karma comes for everyone, Eleanor. Even those who think they're above it." She deleted the message with trembling fingers, telling herself it was probably just a wrong number, a coincidence. But as she crawled back into bed, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that something had been set in motion, something that none of them, not even Julian with all his power and connections, would be able to control. In the morning, she would convince herself she was being foolish. She would laugh with Julian about Mark's weakness, plan their future together, and pretend that the nagging doubt in her gut was just indigestion from too much champagne. But for now, in the darkness of the presidential suite, Eleanor Wellington Andrews felt the first stirrings of fear. Not of Mark specifically, but of what she might have awakened in him. For the first time, she wondered if she had underestimated the quiet, devoted architect she'd married. And for the first time, she wondered if that might prove to be the biggest mistake of her life. Chapter 4. Turning the Tables. The elegant office suite in downtown Manhattan buzzed with nervous energy as Julian St. Clair paced behind his mahogany desk. His phone hadn't stopped ringing all morning, each call bringing worse news than the last. "What do you mean they're pulling out?" he snapped into the receiver. The deal was practically finalized. On the other end, his lead investor cleared his throat. "We've received some concerning information about your previous ventures, Julian. The board feels it would be prudent to distance ourselves until these matters are clarified." "What information? From whom?" "Anonymous sources. Very detailed documentation about certain financial irregularities in your last 3 acquisitions." "The numbers don't add up, Julian." Julian slammed the phone down, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. His computer chimed with another email notification. The 4th major investor withdrawal this week. Eleanor sat on the plush leather sofa, watching her lover unravel. The confident, powerful man who had swept her off her feet was showing cracks in his polished facade. "It's just a temporary setback," she offered, though her voice lacked conviction. Julian whirled on her, his eyes blazing. "Temporary? Do you have any idea how much money I've lost this week? Millions. And now these rumors." He stalked toward her, making her shrink back instinctively. "You're sure Mark doesn't have access to any sensitive information about my businesses?" "No, of course not. He's just an architect, remember? He's probably still hiding in some cheap motel, licking his wounds." Then explain how these investors suddenly know details about deals that were buried under layers of shell companies. Julian's hand shot out, gripping Eleanor's wrist painfully. "If I find out you've been careless with any information..." Eleanor yanked her arm free, shock written across her face. "Julian, you're hurting me." "Oh, am I?" His laugh held no warmth. "You haven't seen anything yet. If I go down, you're going down with me. Or did you forget your role in providing insider information about your husband's development projects?" The threat hung in the air between them. Eleanor rubbed her wrist, seeing Julian clearly for the first time. Not as the exciting, sophisticated man she'd fantasized about, but as someone dangerous and unstable. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. "How's your exciting new life treating you, Eleanor? Be careful what you wish for." She deleted it quickly, but not before Julian noticed her hands shaking. "Who was that?" he demanded. "Wrong number," she lied, forcing a smile. "Darling, why don't we take a break? Go to dinner at Le Cirque. Forget about business for one night?" Julian's phone rang again before he could answer. His face darkened as he listened to the caller. "What do you mean, shipment detained?" "Those containers were supposed to clear customs days ago." He paced as he listened. "No, you don't understand. Those materials are time-sensitive. The entire Singapore project depends on..." "What do you mean, anonymous tip?" Eleanor slipped out of the office, leaving Julian to his crisis. In the elevator, she sagged against the wall, examining the red marks on her wrist. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The glamorous life she'd imagined with Julian was crumbling, replaced by something far darker. Meanwhile, in a modern high-rise across town, Richard Thomas adjusted his Italian silk tie. The distinguished gray at his temples and subtle facial prosthetics transformed him from Mark Andrews into someone else entirely, someone who looked perfectly at home in the world of high finance. "The voice modulator is working perfectly," Ava said, adjusting some settings on her laptop. "Between that and the facial alterations, even Eleanor won't recognize you." "Good." Mark's altered voice was deeper, with a hint of a British accent. Has Rex finished planting the documentation about Julian's past ventures? Already done. The evidence is compelling enough to spook investors, but not so obvious that it points to deliberate sabotage. Ava pulled up several financial reports on her screens. Victor's also made progress on Isabella's case. Mark examined his new reflection. What did he find? Police photos from the scene don't match the official report. There were bruises on her body that weren't mentioned in the autopsy. And Julian's pool man gave a very interesting interview to Victor. Apparently, he was fired the day after Isabella's death and paid a significant sum to relocate to Arizona. Excellent. Mark straightened his cuffs. Time to offer our friend Julian a lifeline he can't resist. You positive? Ava's concern was evident. Getting physically close to them is risky. It's necessary. Some things require a personal touch. He picked up his briefcase. Besides, I want to see their faces when it all falls apart. Across the city, Eleanor stepped out of a taxi in front of her favorite boutique, seeking retail therapy to calm her nerves. A distinguished older gentleman held the door for her. After you, Mrs. St. Clair, he said smoothly. Eleanor started. Oh, I'm not. I'm still technically Mrs. Andrews. My apologies. His smile was charming, his British accent refined. Richard Thomas. I couldn't help but recognize you from the society pages. I believe I'm meeting with your friend, Mr. St. Clair, later this week. Eleanor's social training kicked in automatically. Oh, you must be the investor Julian mentioned. He's very excited about your proposal, as he should be. Though I must say, the lady in the photos didn't do you justice. Richard's eyes held a hint of appreciation that made Eleanor stand straighter, preened slightly. Perhaps you join us for dinner after the meeting? I find that understanding a man's personal life reveals much about his business acumen. I'd like that, Eleanor replied, feeling a flutter of excitement she hadn't experienced since first meeting Julian. Here was someone who clearly belonged in her world, cultured, sophisticated, wealthy, everything she'd wanted Mark to be. If she noticed something familiar in Richard's eyes, she dismissed it. After all, Mark Andrews was a world away from this polished businessman. Later that evening, in the secure penthouse that served as their base of operations, Mark removed his prosthetics while Ava monitored surveillance feeds. She didn't recognize you at all, Ava marveled. Even up close. Eleanor sees what she wants to see. Mark's voice was cold. She looked right through me for 7 years. Why should today be any different? The dinner invitation was a nice touch. Julian won't be able to resist showing off his relationship with her. No, he won't. And that's exactly what we need. Both of them together, guards down, ready to take the bait. Mark studied the documents spread across the table, shell company records, offshore account details, evidence of Julian's past crimes. Everything's in place for Phase 2. Victor confirmed the meeting location is booked? Yes, and Rex has already installed the surveillance equipment. Clara's prepared the financial documentation for the fake investment deal. Ava hesitated. Mark, what happens if Julian discovers who you really are? He won't. Mark's smile held no warmth. Julian's too arrogant to imagine someone he considers beneath him could orchestrate his downfall. Besides, by the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. Ava watched him with a mixture of admiration and concern. The Mark she'd known in college had been kind, somewhat naive. This new Mark was something else entirely, focused, ruthless, dangerous. And if she was honest with herself, this version of him made her heart race in ways the old Mark never had. Chapter 5. The Tangled Web. The private dining room at Le Bernardin hummed with quiet conversation and the gentle clink of fine china. Julian St. Clair sat at the head of the table, trying to project his usual confidence despite the stress of recent weeks. Beside him, Eleanor sparkled in a new dress, playing the role of devoted partner to perfection. Across from them, Richard Thomas swirled his wine with practiced ease. I must say, Julian, despite the recent setbacks in your ventures, I find myself intrigued by the potential. Julian leaned forward eagerly. The media has greatly exaggerated those setbacks. A few nervous investors, nothing more. Perhaps, Richard agreed smoothly. Though I find it interesting that someone of your capabilities would allow such minor obstacles to cause so much disruption. Eleanor noticed Julian's jaw tighten at the subtle criticism. My husband, I mean Julian, is simply being cautious with his resources, she interjected. Richard's gaze shifted to her, warm with appreciation. Ah, a woman who understands business. How refreshing. I've always found that behind many successful men stands an even more brilliant woman. Julian's hand clenched around his wine glass. Eleanor prefers to focus on her social obligations. Now, darling, that's not entirely true, Eleanor protested. I did help coordinate that merger last spring. The Henderson deal? A simple real estate transaction, Julian dismissed. Hardly high finance. Richard raised an eyebrow. I wouldn't underestimate the complexity of real estate development. It requires a keen understanding of market forces, timing, inside knowledge. He paused meaningfully. Speaking of which, I understand you've acquired several properties around a new development site downtown? Julian stiffened slightly. You seem very well informed, Mr. Thomas. Information is the key to success in our world. Wouldn't you agree? Richard's smile was predatory. For instance, I've heard whispers about a potential government contract for that area. The kind of information that could make certain property investments extremely profitable. Eleanor watched the exchange with growing unease. There was something about Richard Thomas that set her on edge, a shadowy familiarity she couldn't quite place. Perhaps we should discuss this in a more private setting, Julian suggested. My thoughts exactly. Richard withdrew an envelope from his jacket. I'm hosting a small gathering at my country estate next week. Very exclusive, very discreet. The perfect venue to discuss certain opportunities that require delicate handling. Julian examined the invitation, his eyes widening slightly at the address. The property was well known among the ultra-wealthy, a secluded mansion with extensive security and a strict no-media policy. Eleanor must come too, of course, Richard added. I find that social occasions often facilitate the best business discussions. We'd be delighted, Eleanor answered before Julian could speak. She ignored his sharp look, focused instead on Richard's approving smile. Later that night, in their penthouse apartment, Julian paced like a caged animal. Something's not right about Thomas, he muttered. He knows too much. Eleanor lounged on the sofa, still buzzing from the expensive wine and Richard's attention. Don't be paranoid. He's clearly well-connected. Isn't that what you want in an investor? Julian whirled on her. And you, practically throwing yourself at him all evening. I was being sociable, Eleanor protested. Isn't that my role? The charming hostess, the sophisticated partner? Your role is to support me, not undermine me with some British playboy. The slap caught Eleanor by surprise, sending her stumbling backward. She touched her cheek in shock, staring at the man she'd thrown away her marriage for. Julian, you hit me? He grabbed her arms, fingers digging in painfully. Listen carefully. At the gathering next week, you will be quiet and decorative. No attempting to show off your negligible business acumen. No flirting with Thomas. Understood? Eleanor nodded mutely, fighting back tears. As soon as Julian released her, she fled to the guest bathroom, locking the door behind her. In the mirror, she examined her reddened cheek. How had she gotten here? She'd left Mark because he was too safe, too boring. Now she was trapped with a man who treated her like property. Her phone buzzed with another anonymous text. Missing the boring life yet? Meanwhile, in their secure penthouse command center, Ava watched the surveillance feed from the restaurant with growing concern. He's unstable, she observed. The pressure is getting to him. Mark, still wearing his Richard Thomas prosthetics, nodded. That's exactly what we want. An unstable Julian is a Julian who makes mistakes. Eleanor looked scared of him. Good. Mark's voice was hard. She wanted excitement. Let her experience all of it. Ava studied his profile. You still care about her, don't you? Despite everything? I care about justice. Mark began removing his disguise. Eleanor made her choice. Now she can live with the consequences. The gathering next week, it's dangerous. Julian's paranoid, volatile. If he discovers who you are, that's why we have contingency plans. Mark pulled up blueprints of the mansion on their screens. Rex has already installed the surveillance equipment in strategic locations. Claire has prepared all the documentation for the fake investment deal. And Victor's found something big about Isabella's death. Ava finished. He's sending the files tonight. Mark's phone chimed with an incoming message. His eyes narrowed as he read Victor's report. Isabella didn't drown, he said quietly. The autopsy photos show signs of strangulation. The water in her lungs was inconsistent with drowning. And the pool man, he didn't just witness the aftermath. He saw Julian holding her under. Why didn't he go to the police? Julian paid him $5 million to disappear. But Victor found him. Mark's smile was grim. And he's ready to talk? Ava touched Mark's arm gently. Be careful next week. Julian's killed before. He'll do it again if he feels threatened. I'm counting on it. Mark covered her hand with his. That's exactly what we need. Julian revealing his true nature in front of multiple witnesses. And Eleanor? What happens to her when Julian snaps? Mark was quiet for a long moment. She chose him. She'll have to face the consequences of that choice. But later that night, as Ava slept in the next room, Mark stared at surveillance photos of Eleanor's bruised face. 7 years of marriage couldn't be erased completely, no matter how much he wanted them to be. He picked up his phone, sent a text from an anonymous number. The garden bench might have been safer than his golden cage. In her locked bathroom, Eleanor read the message and sobbed silently, finally understanding the truth of those words. Chapter 6. The Unraveling. The mansion loomed against the darkening sky, its manicured grounds stretching into the distance. Inside, the gathering was in full swing, a carefully curated mix of wealthy investors and social elite, all drawn by the mysterious Richard Thomas's reputation for facilitating lucrative deals. Julian prowled the edges of the crowd, nursing his third scotch. Eleanor stayed close, the perfect ornamental companion in a gown that concealed her latest bruises. Her eyes kept drifting to Richard Thomas, who moved through the room with effortless grace, commanding attention without seeming to try. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard addressed the gathering. If you'll join me in the library, I have an exciting opportunity to discuss. The library was a magnificent room, lined with leather-bound books and antique furniture. As the guests settled into their seats, Richard activated a hidden panel, revealing a large presentation screen. What I'm about to share must remain strictly confidential, he began. It concerns a development project that could reshape downtown Manhattan. Eleanor felt her blood freeze as familiar blueprints appeared on the screen. Mark's project, the one she'd photographed for Julian. But these weren't Mark's original plans. These showed additional details, government contracts, classified information that she and Julian had used to buy up surrounding properties. Julian surged to his feet. Where did you get these? Concerned parties brought them to my attention, Richard replied smoothly. Along with some very interesting financial records, more documents appeared on screen. Offshore account numbers, shell company transactions, property deeds. Eleanor recognized them all. Everything she and Julian had done, laid bare before the city's most influential people. This is outrageous. Julian's face was purple with rage. You have no right. Actually, I have right. Richard's voice changed, dropping the British accent. He reached up, peeled away the prosthetics that had transformed his features. I have right. Eleanor's mind refused to process what she was seeing. It couldn't be, but it was. Mark. No, she whispered. It's impossible. Nothing's impossible with the right motivation. Mark's smile was cold. And you gave me plenty of that, didn't you, Eleanor? Julian lunged across the room, his composure completely shattered. You did this? Mark sidestepped smoothly, letting Julian's momentum carry him into a bookshelf. I had help. Quite a lot of it, actually. You'd be surprised how many people want to see you fall. The other guests backed away, murmuring in shock. Several had their phones out, recording everything. Security. Julian bellowed. Get in here now. Your security team is currently occupied, Mark informed him. Something about anonymous tips to various law enforcement agencies regarding your business practices. Eleanor stood frozen, her mind racing through the past weeks. Richard Thomas's familiar gestures, the pointed comments, the way he'd drawn out Julian's worst qualities. You orchestrated all of this, she realized. The failed deals, the investor pullouts. I learned from the best, didn't I? Mark's eyes met hers. You taught me how to betray someone's trust. I just improved on your technique. The library doors burst open, but instead of security, federal agents poured in, weapons drawn. Julian St. Clair, the lead agent, announced, "You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and in connection with the death of Isabella St. Clair." Eleanor's knees buckled. Isabella? What? Oh, did Julian never mention his first wife? Mark's voice dripped with false concern. The one who tragically drowned in their pool? Except she didn't drown. Did she, Julian? The pool man saw everything. Julian's face went chalk white. You're lying. Thompson is gone, disappeared. To Arizona, yes, with $5 million of your dollars. But money can't quite erase the memory of watching you hold your wife underwater, can it? Victor found him quite eager to clear his conscience. As the agents moved to handcuff Julian, he made one desperate lunge, not at Mark, but at Eleanor. You, he snarled. You must have told him something, given him information. His hands reached for her throat, but Mark was faster. He intercepted Julian, twisting his arm behind his back with surprising strength. Still beating women, Julian? Mark's voice was dangerously soft. Not anymore. The agents pulled Julian away as he ranted and threatened. Eleanor stood trembling, watching her glamorous life crumble around her. Mrs. Andrews, one of the agents, approached her. We'll need you to come with us as well. We have some questions about your role in Mr. St. Clair's financial dealings. Eleanor looked pleadingly at Mark. I didn't know about Isabella, about any of it. You have to believe me. Like you didn't know about Julian while we were married? Mark shook his head. Goodbye, Eleanor. Enjoy the consequences of your choices. As Eleanor was led away, she glanced back one last time. Through the library window, she saw the garden bench on the mansion's grounds, an exact replica of the one from the Hamilton resort. Mark's final, pointed reminder of where this all began. The aftermath unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony. News channels blazed with headlines about Julian St. Clair's arrest. Photos and videos from the gathering spread across social media. Eleanor's tearful perp walk made the front page of the society sections, a stark contrast to the glamorous photos from just weeks before. But Mark wasn't finished. Working with Ava and their team, they released evidence piece by piece, ensuring maximum impact. Julian's business empire collapsed like a house of cards, taking down corrupt partners and officials with it. In the secure penthouse, Ava monitored the fallout on multiple screens. The Isabella case has been officially reopened. With Thompson's testimony and the new evidence, Julian won't see daylight again, Mark finished. He stood at the window, watching the city lights. What about Eleanor? Cooperating with authorities in exchange for leniency. She's provided detailed information about Julian's schemes. Ava hesitated. She's also been trying to contact you. Of course she has. Now that her perfect life has fallen apart, she remembers the boring, safe option. Mark's laugh held no humor. Not this time. A warning flashed on one of Ava's screens. Mark, we have a problem. Someone's trying to hack our security systems. Julian's people? No, this is different. More sophisticated. Ava's fingers flew across her keyboard. Oh no. What? It's my old employers. The agency must have tracked my digital fingerprints from the hack into Julian's accounts. She looked up, fear clear in her eyes. They're coming for me. Mark moved to her side. How long do we have? Minutes, maybe. They'll send a tactical team. She started deleting files frantically. You need to go. Now. I'll handle this. I'm not leaving you to face them alone. This isn't your fight, Mark. You made it my fight when you helped me. He pulled her away from the computers. We do this together. The lights in the penthouse flickered. Security alarms blared. They're here, Ava whispered. Mark pulled her close, his mind racing through options. After everything they'd accomplished, he refused to let it end here. They had built something together. Not just revenge, but trust, understanding, perhaps even something more. The door burst open. Armed figures in tactical gear swarmed in. Mark stepped in front of Ava, facing whatever came next with the same cold determination that had driven him since that night at the Hamilton resort. Federal agents, a voice commanded. Everyone freeze. Ava gripped Mark's arm. Wait, I know that voice. A figure stepped forward, removing his tactical helmet. Hello, Ava. Been a while. Director Chin? Ava moved beside Mark. I don't understand. We've been watching, the director explained. Your work exposing St. Clair's organization. It aligned with an ongoing investigation of ours. His connections reached higher than you knew. Another agent brought forward a laptop. The evidence you gathered, it doesn't just implicate St. Clair. It exposes several corrupt officials we've been tracking. So you're not here to arrest me? Ava asked cautiously. Arrest you? Director Chin actually smiled. We're here to offer you immunity. Both of you. In exchange for your cooperation in bringing down the rest of the network. Mark and Ava exchanged glances. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was a chance to expand their justice to an even larger scale. We're listening, Mark said. They had survived, just as he knew they would. And now their story was taking an unexpected turn, one that would lead them toward even greater purpose. Chapter 7. The Price of Revenge. The courthouse buzzed with anticipation as Julian St. Clair was led into the courtroom. His suit had been replaced by prison orange, his confident swagger reduced to shuffling steps and shackles. The media pack surged forward, cameras flashing. Mark sat in the back row beside Ava, his arm in a sling from their confrontation with Julian's hitmen. The brutal fight had left its marks on both of them, but they'd survived, together. The state calls Eleanor Wellington Andrews to the stand, the prosecutor announced. Eleanor rose from her seat near the front, avoiding Julian's burning glare as she made her way to the witness box. Gone were the clothes and perfect makeup. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile. Mrs. Wellington Andrews, please tell the court about your knowledge of Mr. St. Clair's business practices. Eleanor's voice trembled slightly. Julian used insider information to manipulate property values around development projects. I helped him obtain confidential documents from my husband's architectural firm. And were you aware of Mr. St. Clair's other activities? Specifically regarding his first wife, Isabella? No. Eleanor's composure cracked. I didn't know about Isabella until the evidence came out. If I had known he was capable of murder. Julian lunged to his feet. You lying bitch. You knew exactly who I was. The judge's gavel cracked. Order. Mr. St. Clair, control yourself or you'll be removed. As the testimony continued, Mark felt Ava's hand slip into his. You okay? She whispered. He watched Eleanor detail their betrayal, her voice breaking as she described Julian's escalating violence. I should feel satisfied, he murmured. This is what I wanted. Them paying for what they did. But I just feel empty. The prosecution presented their evidence. Financial records showing Julian's fraudulent schemes, testimony from the pool man about Isabella's murder, surveillance footage from the mansion revealing Julian's attempt to attack Eleanor during his arrest. Julian's legal team tried to paint him as a successful businessman targeted by jealous competitors. But they couldn't explain away the evidence, couldn't dismiss the pattern of violence and corruption that Mark and his allies had uncovered. During a recess, Eleanor approached Mark in the hallway. Can we talk? Please. He noticed the fading bruises on her neck where Julian had tried to strangle her. What's left to say? I'm sorry. Tears filled her eyes. I know it's not enough, but I am so sorry. I threw away something real and precious for a fantasy that turned into a nightmare. You're only sorry because it didn't work out, Mark replied coldly. If Julian had been better at hiding his true nature, you'd still be with him. That's not true. I made a terrible mistake. I know that now. Maybe we could try again? Start over? Mark felt Ava tense beside him. No, Eleanor. We can't. Because of her? Eleanor glanced at Ava bitterly. So you get your revenge and a replacement wife in one neat package? You don't get to judge my choices. Mark's voice was quiet but firm. You lost that right when you plotted to humiliate me at the Hamilton resort. Remember the garden bench? Eleanor flinched. I wasn't thinking clearly. Julian had me convinced that I was beneath you? Too boring, too ordinary? Mark shook his head. You made your choice, Eleanor. Now you have to live with it. She reached for his arm. Mark, please. I've lost everything, my reputation, my friends, my freedom once they sentence me. Don't make me lose you too. You already did. He stepped back. I acknowledge your remorse, Eleanor. But some things can't be fixed. Some trust, once broken, can't be rebuilt. As Eleanor was led away by her lawyer, Ava squeezed Mark's hand. That couldn't have been easy. None of this has been easy. He stared after his ex-wife's retreating figure. I spent months planning their downfall, dreaming of revenge. But now that it's happening, you're not as cold as you wanted to be? I wanted to hate them completely, to feel nothing but satisfaction at their destruction. He turned to Ava. Instead, I feel tired, like the anger and bitterness have burned themselves out, leaving just ashes. Back in the courtroom, Julian's mask of civility finally cracked under cross-examination. He ranted about conspiracies against him, threatened witnesses, and ultimately confessed to Isabella's murder in a rage-filled tirade that had the jury recoiling. She was just like the rest of you. Weak, ungrateful, he shouted. She threatened to expose my business dealings, so I shut her up permanently. And I'd do it again. The judge ordered him removed from the courtroom. As guards dragged him past Mark's row, Julian lunged again, spittle flying from his lips. This is your fault, he snarled. You and that tech whore. I should have killed you both when I had the chance. Mark stood, facing his wife's lover calmly. No, Julian. This is your fault. Your choices, your crimes, your true nature finally exposed. The only thing I did was shine a light on what was already there. Later that night, in their shared apartment, Mark stood at the window while Ava worked at her computers. The city lights blurred as he remembered Eleanor's tears, Julian's rage, the path of destruction his revenge had carved through all their lives. I keep thinking about what you said months ago, he mused, about whether revenge would make me feel better. Ava looked up. And it didn't. Not really. He turned to her. But something else did. What? Finding strength I didn't know I had. Learning who my real friends are. He moved to her side. Discovering that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something better from the ashes of what they took from you. Ava touched his cheek gently. And what do you want to build? Mark covered her hand with his. I'm not sure yet, but I know I want you to be part of it. Chapter 8. The Garden Bench Justice. The Hamilton Resort looked exactly as Mark remembered it, grand, exclusive, coldly beautiful. But this time, he wasn't here as an unwanted outsider. He was here as the new owner. The paperwork's finalized, his lawyer confirmed. The resort is yours, Mr. Andrews. Mark nodded, his eyes fixed on the garden bench where this story had begun. It sat innocently amid manicured flower beds, no sign of the cruelty it had witnessed. What are your plans for the property? The lawyer asked. Most of it will be converted into a retreat center for survivors of domestic abuse and betrayal. Mark smiled slightly. The garden bench is being donated to a homeless shelter. Seems fitting. He walked the grounds alone, remembering that night. Eleanor's sneering dismissal, Beatrice's cutting remarks, Julian's smug superiority. They tried to break him here, to reduce him to nothing. Instead, they'd awakened something in him that had led to their own downfall. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Julian St. Clair sentenced to life without parole. A text from Ava followed. Eleanor got 5 years with possibility of parole in 3. Beatrice took a plea deal, house arrest and massive fines. Justice, served cold and complete. Yet Mark felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Only a quiet certainty that this chapter of his life was ending. He found Beatrice waiting in the resort's lobby, her clothes now looking worn, her perfect makeup unable to hide her exhaustion. I suppose you're here to gloat, she said bitterly.
No.
Mark sat across from her. I'm here to tell you that your house arrest conditions allow you to continue your charity work. The resort's new mission might interest you. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. Why would you offer me anything? Because holding on to hate hurts the person holding it more than anyone else. He stood. You have skills, connections, experience in fundraising. You can wallow in your fall from grace, or you can use what you have to help others. Your choice. He left her there, considering his words. Outside, a truck was loading the garden bench for delivery to the shelter. Mark watched it go, feeling another piece of his old life fall away. At the courthouse, Eleanor was being processed for transfer to prison. She'd asked to see him one last time. I heard about the resort, she said through the visitor's glass. It's a good thing you're doing. It's not about good or bad anymore. Mark studied the woman he'd once loved beyond reason. It's about choices and consequences. Growth and change. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I already have, he realized as he said it. Not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying that anger. It was poisoning me. Eleanor wiped her eyes. I didn't deserve your love back then. I see that now. No, you didn't. But that's not why I'm here. He placed his hand against the glass. I'm here to say goodbye, Eleanor. Really goodbye this time. I hope you find peace in your new life. She pressed her hand to his through the barrier. One last touch that wasn't really a touch at all. Be happy, Mark. You deserve it. That evening, Mark joined Ava at their favorite rooftop restaurant. She'd been working late, using her tech skills now to protect abuse survivors rather than track financial crimes. How did it go? She asked as he sat beside her. It went. He took her hand. I said my goodbyes, to Eleanor, to Beatrice, to the person I used to be. It feels right. And the resort? Will open as the Phoenix Center in 6 months. Rising from ashes and all that. He smiled. We've already got a waiting list of people needing help. Ava leaned against him. And what about us? What about us? Well, you've gotten your revenge, achieved justice, made peace with your past. She hesitated. Do you still need me around? Mark turned to face her fully. Need you? Ava, you're not part of the revenge story anymore. You're part of what comes next. The rebuilding, the healing, the future I want to create. Even with all my baggage, the agency could come after me again. Then we'll face them together. He cupped her face gently. You saw me at my worst, consumed by anger and revenge. You helped me find my way back to something better. How could I not want you in my life? She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Below them, the city stretched out like a sea of possibilities. So what now? She murmured against his lips. Now? Now we build something new. Together. Chapter 9. A Ruthless Legacy. 1 year later, Mark stood before a room full of people at the Phoenix Center's first anniversary celebration. The former Hamilton Resort had been transformed, its cold grandeur replaced by warmth and welcome, its exclusivity turned to inclusivity. When I started down the path of revenge, he addressed the crowd. I thought justice meant destroying those who hurt me. I was wrong. True justice is about breaking cycles of pain, about turning wounds into wisdom. He saw Ava in the audience, smiling encouragement. Beside her sat Victor, Rex, and Clara, the team that had helped him achieve revenge now dedicated to helping others heal. This center exists because of a garden bench, he continued. A simple piece of furniture meant to humiliate became a symbol of resilience. Today, that bench sits in a homeless shelter, reminding people that rock bottom can become a foundation to build upon. Beatrice sat in the back row, her clothes replaced by simple business attire. Her house arrest ankle monitor was visible beneath her skirt, but she held her head high. She'd thrown herself into the center's work, her social networking skills now used to connect survivors with resources and support. The greatest revenge against cruelty, Mark concluded, is not more cruelty. It's creating something beautiful and strong from what was meant to break us. It's helping others find their way back from darkness. It's choosing to be better, not bitter. After the speeches, Mark found Ava in the garden, redesigned now with healing spaces and meditation paths. Eleanor's parole hearing is next month, she mentioned. I know. The center's already arranged a transition program for her. He wrapped his arms around Ava. She's been doing well in prison, counseling other inmates, taking business classes. You're a better person than most. No, just someone who finally understood that holding on to hate was hurting me more than anyone else. He kissed her temple. Besides, I have better things to focus on now. Like what? Like marrying you next spring. Like expanding the center's programs. Like building a life that's about more than past pain. They stood together in the garden that had once represented his humiliation. Now it bloomed with new purpose, new hope. We should visit Julian, Ava said suddenly. Mark raised an eyebrow. Why? To show him that his cruelty didn't define us. That we built something meaningful from his attempts to destroy you. You're right. Mark smiled. And to thank him in a way. If he hadn't revealed his true nature, I might never have found my strength. Or you. Later that night, in their home overlooking the city, Mark watched Ava sleep. Her laptop glowed nearby. She'd been designing new security systems for domestic violence shelters, using her skills to protect others. He thought about Eleanor in prison, working toward redemption. About Julian in his cell, facing the consequences of his choices. About Beatrice, channeling her social influence into positive change. His revenge had been ruthless, yes, but its legacy wasn't destruction, it was transformation. The garden bench that was meant to break him had become a cornerstone for healing. The man who'd lost everything had found purpose, love, and a way to help others rise from their own ashes. Mark Andrews, the boring architect who'd been discarded like trash, had become something more. Not a victim, not a villain, but a builder of new beginnings. And that, he realized, was the most complete revenge of all. Epilogue. 10 years later. The Phoenix Center's 10th anniversary celebration filled its sprawling grounds with hundreds of guests. What had started as a single converted resort had grown into a nationwide network of healing centers, each one offering hope to survivors of betrayal and abuse. Mark Andrews stood at the podium, his hair now touched with distinguished gray at the temples. Time had added character to his features without diminishing his presence. Beside him, Ava beamed with pride, their twin daughters, 8-year-old Isabella and Grace, fidgeting in their party dresses in the front row. 10 years ago, Mark addressed the gathered crowd. This journey began with a garden bench. What was meant to break me instead became the foundation of something extraordinary. Today, the Phoenix Centers have helped over 50,000 people rebuild their lives. He glanced at his family, drawing strength from their presence. But this anniversary isn't about numbers or achievements. It's about transformation, not just of buildings or programs, but of human spirits. Everyone here has a story of rising from ashes. Today, we celebrate all of them. In the audience, familiar faces reflected the decade's passage. Victor, now the center's head of security, sat with his wife Clara, who transformed the financial advisory program into a cornerstone of survivor rehabilitation. Their teenage son, training to follow in his father's investigative footsteps, recorded the speech on his phone. Rex, who'd traded hacking for developing cybersecurity systems protecting abuse survivors, managed the center's technical infrastructure. His team had prevented countless attempts by abusers to track down those who'd escaped, turning his skills toward protection rather than intrusion. Beatrice Wellington occupied a seat near the middle, her clothes replaced by elegant but understated business attire. After completing her house arrest, she'd thrown herself into fundraising for the centers, her social connections now serving a greater purpose. The years had humbled her, replaced her sharp edges with genuine compassion. "Mom," Isabella tugged at Ava's sleeve. "Is that her? The lady from your stories?" Ava followed her daughter's gaze to a woman entering quietly from the back. Eleanor Wellington Andrews, now Eleanor Carter, had aged gracefully. After serving her sentence, she dedicated herself to counseling other women trapped in abusive relationships, drawing on her own experiences to help them escape. "Yes, sweetheart," Ava whispered. "That's her." The girls knew a carefully edited version of their parents' history, enough to understand the center's importance without burdening them with the full weight of the past. They knew Eleanor had once been married to their father, that she'd made mistakes that hurt people, but had worked hard to become better. After his speech, Mark made his way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and sharing memories. He paused when he reached Eleanor. "The outreach program you proposed is doing well," he said warmly. "3 new locations opening next month." Eleanor smiled, the expression genuine now, free of the artificial polish she'd once worn like armor. "I never thought I'd say this, but getting caught was the best thing that could have happened to me. It forced me to face who I was becoming." They'd found a careful peace over the years, professional respect replacing both love and bitterness. Eleanor had remarried, a kind-hearted teacher who knew her past and loved her anyway. They worked with at-risk youth, preventing cycles of abuse before they could begin. "How's Daniel?" Mark asked, referring to her husband. "Wonderful. We're actually expecting our first child." Eleanor's hand rested on her slight bump. "A boy. Congratulations. You'll be great parents, thanks to the lessons we learned here." Eleanor glanced around the center. "Sometimes I walk these grounds and remember that night. How cruel we were, how entitled we felt. I can't believe I was ever that person." "You're not her anymore," Mark assured her. "None of us are who we were then." Their conversation was interrupted by excited squeals as Isabella and Grace ran up, followed by their mother. "Daddy, Mom says we can have cake now." Mark scooped up Grace while Isabella attached herself to his leg. "Did she? Well, we better not keep these young ladies waiting." Eleanor watched the family interaction with a smile that held no envy, only genuine happiness for the man she'd once tried to destroy. "They're beautiful, Mark. You and Ava have built something wonderful here, and I don't just mean the centers." Later that evening, the celebration moved indoors. A documentary about the center's history played on large screens, featuring interviews with successful graduates of their programs. "I thought I was worthless," one woman testified. "My ex-husband had convinced me I deserved the abuse. The Phoenix Center showed me my true value, helped me build a new life. I came here broken," a man shared. "They didn't just give me shelter, they taught me financial independence, helped me start my own business. Now I employ other survivors, continue the cycle of help." In a quiet corner, Ava found Mark watching the screens thoughtfully. "Penny for your thoughts?" "Just thinking about paths not taken." He pulled her close. "If I'd chosen pure revenge, focused only on destroying Eleanor and Julian, I'd have destroyed myself too. You chose to build instead of burn." "We chose," he corrected. "You saw past my anger to what I could become. Loved me even when I was consumed by darkness." Ava kissed him softly. "You did the same for me. When my past caught up with us, you never wavered." The agency that had pursued Ava had eventually been exposed for illegal surveillance operations. Rex's evidence had helped bring down corrupt officials while protecting Ava's new life. Now she consulted with government cyber defense programs, her skills recognized and valued rather than exploited. "Have you seen the latest letter?" she asked quietly. Mark nodded. Julian St. Clair, serving life without parole, wrote to them occasionally. His early letters had been full of threats and blame, but over the years, they'd shifted toward reluctant reflection. His latest correspondence actually expressed remorse, not just for his crimes, but for the person he'd chosen to be. "Seems genuine this time," Mark mused. "He's been counseling younger inmates, trying to steer them toward better choices." "People can change," Ava replied. "We see it here every day." On the dance floor, Isabella and Grace waltzed with Victor's son, their laughter bright and untouched by the shadows that had brought their parents together. Beatrice watched from her table, remembering another party years ago where she'd wielded cruelty like a weapon. "They're so innocent," she remarked as Mark and Ava joined her. "So free from the prejudices I carried, the ones I tried to infect Eleanor with." "You helped break that cycle," Mark reminded her. "Your work with our social integration programs has changed countless lives." Beatrice's social connections, once used to exclude and diminish, now opened doors for survivors seeking employment, education, and acceptance. She'd learned that true class had nothing to do with wealth or status. The garden bench that had started everything occupied a place of honor in the center's museum. Beside it, a plaque told its story, not just of humiliation and revenge, but of transformation and hope. New benches, crafted by survivors learning carpentry skills, filled the center's meditation gardens. Each one represented another story of darkness turned to light, pain transformed into purpose. As the evening wound down, Mark found himself back in the garden where Eleanor had once mocked him, where Julian had flaunted his victory, where Beatrice had suggested he sleep on a bench. Deep thoughts. Victor joined him, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. Remembering the man I was when you first agreed to help me, Mark accepted a glass. So focused on revenge, on making them hurt like I hurt. You had every right to that anger. Maybe. But anger alone doesn't heal anything. Mark gestured at the thriving center around them. This heals. Helping others heals. Breaking cycles heals. They were interrupted by Grace's voice. Daddy, Isabella took my sparkly hairband. Mark laughed. And sometimes chasing 2 energetic daughters heals too. The next morning, the Andrews family gathered for breakfast in their sun-filled kitchen. Isabella and Grace debated the merits of different breakfast cereals while Ava checked the center's security systems remotely. 3 new admissions overnight, she reported. 2 domestic violence survivors and 1 victim of financial abuse. Mark nodded, already planning their care protocols. The work never really stopped, but it didn't feel like work anymore. It felt like purpose. Mom, Isabella asked suddenly, is it true that Dad used to be an architect? He still is, honey, Ava smiled. He designs all our new centers. But now he builds more than just buildings. He builds new beginnings. Mark met his wife's eyes over their daughters' heads, remembering the painful path that had led them here. The revenge he'd sought had given way to something far more powerful, the ability to help others transform their own pain into purpose. The garden bench that was meant to break him had become a cornerstone of healing. The man who'd lost everything had found a greater destiny than he'd ever imagined. And the love he'd thought was destroyed had been replaced by something deeper, truer, and unshakable. In the end, the greatest revenge hadn't been destroying his enemies. It had been building something so beautiful and meaningful that the past lost its power to hurt. Isabella and Grace raced off to get ready for school, their innocent joy a testament to cycles broken and new stories begun. Mark pulled Ava close, breathing in the peace of their shared life. Any regrets? She murmured. Not one, he replied. Every step, even the painful ones, led us here. Outside their window, the sun rose on another day of healing, of building, of transforming darkness into light. The Phoenix Centers would welcome new survivors, offer new chances, create new stories of redemption. And Mark Andrews, once broken on a garden bench, would continue showing others how to rise from their own ashes, not through revenge, but through the far more powerful acts of healing, hope, and love. The legacy of his ruthless revenge had become something none of them could have imagined on that cruel night at the Hamilton Resort. It had become a testament to the human spirit's capacity for both justice and mercy, destruction and creation, endings and beginnings. Most importantly, it had become proof that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to our greatest purpose. If we have the courage to build rather than burn, to transform rather than destroy, to love rather than hate. And in that truth lay the most complete victory of all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.